Spotlight. I'm James Cole.
And I'm Madison Malachi.
And I am Ayana Milkius. We are students at Harlem School of the Arts. This podcast is hosted by HSA Theater Prep, and you can find the video on YouTube or on the Harlem School of the Arts website.
Spotlight is a podcast series taped in front of a live audience, bringing you intimate discussions with some of New York's most prolific creative professionals.
And this week, the light's on Keenan Scott II. He's the playwright of the Broadway play, Thoughts of a Colored Man.
Please welcome Keenan Scott II to the Spotlight.
Yes.
Hello.
How's everybody?
Hi.
Hi.
Good.
How are you doing?
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. I just wanted to say your show, and I hadn't seen any Broadway shows in a while, so yours was the first after the pandemic.
Yes. Thank you.
And I hadn't cried like that in a long time.
Hopefully good.
I will say,
Good
yes,
vibe.
no, it made me so happy. It was amazing.
Thank you.
To piggyback off of Ayana, that was also the first Broadway play I've seen since the pandemic started. And I thought the play was funny. I didn't realize how funny it was until the audience was also laughing. We were enjoying that experience, so I really enjoyed your show.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the show as much as everybody else, and this was actually my first in-person Broadway play, so I really got to see the emotions, and I really understood the expressions that the actors were, using in themselves, and they really had emotion to put into their emotions.
Mm-hmm. I didn't let you down, did I? For your first Broadway show?
Not at all.
No? Okay. All right. Gotta check.
For those who don't know what the play is about, if you could you give us a short summary or just an overall view of what it is?
Sure. So Thoughts of a Colored Man takes place over the course of one day. It centers 7 black men in a gentrifying neighborhood in Brooklyn. So I imagine the play takes place around Clinton Hill, Bed-Stuy, Fort Greene area, which is nothing like Brooklyn used to be, right? With gentrification, and these guys really just exploring who they are and their identity in this new neighborhood. And I do that with the use of slam poetry and prose, also traditional dialogue, and I kind of fuse all of that together to be able to deliver these men's message. And it's a new genre that I've coined and worked on over the years called slam narrative, which is rooted in African folklore while using prose and spoken word and all those things at the same time to be able to really deliver, a story in a poetic kind of heightened language environment.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is the overall message, if there is one, you are saying with this piece?
A little bit. That's closer. That works. Thank you. One more time.
What would you say is the overall message, if there is one, for this piece?
For me, when I create, I always want to write and create situations where it builds empathy in its people. So the biggest message for me is I want people to leave the play with more empathy than what they came. I want to showcase these men and show maybe a demographic that they don't know. Maybe a lot of these men may be family members, could be co-workers, could be passerbyers on the bus or the train, but I really want the audience to leave with more empathy and leaving understanding these men that they might not know as well. So the goal of all my pieces, for the most part, and definitely Thoughts of a Colored Man, is to build more empathy in the audience members.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When did you get the news that Thoughts of a Colored Man would be on Broadway, and what was your reaction?
That's a great question. There's a lot of steps before getting to Broadway, so I kind of knew it was coming, but actually the official news, I had people, my phone started going crazy, social media. When the article came out, I was actually just moving around the city. I think I had a meeting or something like that. I didn't even realize the news came out yet until I saw my phone and saw all the messages and things like that. So really, I was moving around the city. I was shocked because that's when it was official, right? When it was in print, everybody can read about it and things of that nature. So it was one of the best days that I can remember because it's been such a long journey. It was a 15-year journey for me from the start of writing the piece to getting it to Broadway. So it was really an exciting moment for me and my family. Called my wife, called my mother, and by then everybody kind of already knew. So I think I celebrated by just eating a good meal and spending time with my wife and daughter. So, but it was a good day when I found out.
And what was that meal?
I could not tell you because this was I got the news that it was official maybe going on 2 years ago now.
Okay.
So I can't remember at this
That's
point.
okay.
It was good. My wife can cook, so whatever it was good.
That's great. That's great. Your play was like one of the first to come to Broadway after the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Did that realization hit you fast, or did it take some time to be like, oh, this is really happening?
The journey has been so long, so I kind of been sitting with it for a while. But it was truly amazing because before the pandemic, before COVID hit, we was actually supposed to come to Broadway in 2020.
Oh.
So those plans were derailed.
Okay.
After we finished our regional run in 2019 at Syracuse Stage and Baltimore Center Stage in the fall of 2019, we were positioned to come in the fall of 2020. Of course, pandemic happened, all the events in our society that happened during 2020, which derailed about like a year and a half. So to be the first new play to announce coming to Broadway was amazing. Really, my fondest memory is having the marquee be revealed, which was special. I'm named after my father, clearly, right? Keenan Scott II, so I know he was happy to see his name in lights as well. And it was just a proud moment for my family. We was all there. Me and my family are very close. I was raised by a village, so all my aunts, all 1,000 of them was there. My uncles, my sister wasn't able to make it. She lives on the West Coast, but everybody was there. It was joyous. Of course, cameras were out and things of that nature. But really, for me, being a fan of the arts, I couldn't believe that I was at a theater that was on the same street as Lion King. That's the first thing I said, because I really, I didn't grow up like a theater kid or studying theater. I didn't start studying theater until I was 18 in college. So for me, I didn't know the exact locations of all the theaters, but everybody knows where Lion King is, where Wicked is, and things of that nature. So to be a couple of theaters up from Lion King, for me, being a New Yorker, it was amazing. So that was probably my fondest memory, having the marquee revealed at the theater.
Well, this I guess is another question. It is a question. How do you feel now that you have gone, 15 years of writing, post-production, you've had something on Broadway, and now you're on to more things. How does that, that's a lot.
It's a whole
lot. That's a lot.
It's a whole lot.
Does that still, do you still have to register that? Oh my gosh, I have something on Broadway. It's on Broadway. It's now, people know it. So,
Yeah, it's a hard thing to realize. For me, I like to focus on my work and my craft, because it can become overwhelming if I try to wrap my head around, Broadway and people I've met and things of that nature. Certain things have to happen for me to say, wait, I did make it to Broadway. Because a lot of times I'm just very focused on my family and creating art. But it truly is a blessing. It's humbling. It's forever changing. Broadway definitely changed the trajectory of my career and things I was already doing for so many years. So it really is amazing, and I don't know if it really has settled yet. There's certain things that happen when an article comes out, or certain people might reach out to me. It kind of sinks in a little more, but it's a very hard thing to wrap my head around because it's been a long journey for myself.
Mm-hmm. When do you think that this was a story you wanted to tell, you wanted to explain and show to people, like your feelings? When did you feel like that?
It's a great question. So for me, I first started studying acting when I was 18 years old, freshman in college. So I wasn't really well versed with the art form of theater. So I didn't really know a lot of the playwrights. I didn't really know a lot of theater history at that time. So for me, when I started to learn these playwrights and started to read these great American dramas that, they tell you have to read while you're studying theater, I didn't see myself represented in those plays. I didn't see any contemporary stories that spoke to who I was as a person, my community, where I was from. So for me, I wanted to create what I was partaking in because I didn't feel like I was a part of the art form I was studying. I didn't see young black characters that represented me. I didn't see characters that represented where I was from in Queens, where I lived in Southern Maryland. So I wanted to create that. For me, unfortunately, in my department, there was only 4 black males at the most at any given time of my college career. So I wanted to be able to create something that we could call our own, where we didn't have to change ourselves. We could be confident in who we were when we was on stage. And that was the early, that was like the origins of me writing Thoughts of a Colored Man. Did I know it was gonna get to Broadway when I was 18 years old? Absolutely not. But that's when I started writing and had this idea to where they often told us as young men that we weren't able to express ourselves. But for me, I was coming from a world of poetry. So I heard people expressing themselves all the time. That wasn't foreign to me. So for me, I wanted to be able to personify those states of beings and those emotions like you saw in the play with love and depression and happiness and anger. I wanted to actually personify those states of beings and emotions into people. And I wanted to experiment with how would that be if these emotions and states of beings talk to each other. So to dispel the stereotype that young men don't express themselves and don't know how, I wanted to be able to kind of encourage people out there that look like myself to be able to do that and for the world to see it at the same time.
Thank you.
To go off of that, it took you about 15 years to write the play. Did you have any regrets or challenges that you really had to work on?
Regrets, no.
Okay.
It's a weird thing looking back, because now it seems fast. Now that Broadway's here, the Broadway run is finished at the moment. So looking back, it seems very fast. If you would have told me at 18, 19 years old it would take that long, I might not have done it, right? If you tell somebody, hey, you really love this, it's gonna take you 16 years to get to this point, that's very daunting. So not knowing that and experiencing the journey, what was really beautiful. And when you're young, you really don't understand when people tell you that the best part of getting to a destination is the journey, because we're so focused on the destination, but it really is the journey. All the actors and great artists and theaters that I've been able to work at over those 15, 16 years was truly the special part of it. By the time I got to Broadway, it was a lot of business, mounting it and all of those things that you have to worry about, but really the journey of exploring this piece with close friends of mine. My friends helped me craft this piece very early on because I didn't have the money, right, to pay actors and rent out theaters and things like that. So for me, definitely no regrets. It's definitely been a beautiful journey. Challenges, absolutely. When I started the journey of the play, being 18, 19, undergrad, not really knowing what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to perform. And then now, being in my mid-30s, I'm a different person. I've grown a lot, married with child now, far from, graduation in school and things of that nature. So throughout that time in my, young adulthood, there's been a lot of challenges, right? Having to, work different jobs and things of that nature, still finding time for my art, being able to have time for my family and all the things that life brings all of us. So it has been challenging at times, but I do believe that storytelling in different mediums is my purpose, and that's what I kind of go back to on those challenging days and when I hit those obstacles to say, this is my purpose, this is what I'm supposed to do, and kind of, focus on that.
Nice. And as a slam poet, what was the challenge or big difference you noticed in writing a play versus what you're used to for slam poetry?
Oh, it's a big difference. Training myself to write a poem that lasted 3 minutes in competition. And really the structure for me. Like I tell people now, because it's a part of my testimony, growing up, I was a kid that was in special ed from kindergarten to about 6th grade. I'm also dyslexic as well. So for me, English was always a challenging subject for me before I discovered that I was a creative writer. Still have challenges now that I know how to work with now, right? But for me, the hardest part was the structure of plays or a teleplay or a screenplay, because for me, structure is challenging for me. I'm a character-driven writer, so dialogue comes really natural. Being from New York, as you know, we all hear different languages and dialects all the time, so for me, that's kind of natural to do that. But the hardest part to transition for me from writing 3-minute competitive pieces was really the structure of writing in 2 acts and things of that nature, and really structuring a story to have a engine, a through line, and all of those things. So that was probably like the biggest challenge, was the structure for me.
Right, and with screenwriting, I'm a little familiar. It's a lot of, it's not a lot of direction, but because I know you were saying before, it's about detail. Mm-hmm. So was that something that you allowed the actors, I guess, in the future time, to look at and decide on their own, or was there some details where you were like, this needs to be in there?
Really, it depends on the story. All of my stories are different, and if we want to talk about stage plays, it really just depends. I tell anybody, keep whatever direction in there helps, whatever artist is doing it, help tell your story. So I try not to get too prescriptive on acting choices, but if I need somebody to move stage left to stage right for a certain reason for the story, then I'll say so. Or if it's a certain set piece that is absolutely needed to tell my story, or a prop piece or things like that, those are the details I try to keep in. But usually I try not to be as prescriptive, because you want artists to be able to do what they're great at, right? Whether it's the set designer, lighting designer, the director, the actors, you want them to be able to bring their genius to the forefront. So I try not to be too prescriptive, but I'm just prescriptive enough to make sure that the story is told in the right way.
Out of the 15 years that you worked on the play, how much was spent on writing versus post-production?
That is an amazing question. That's kind of hard to tell. A lot of time went into writing. I would say, maybe like 50-50, right? Because it was always a balancing act for me. I would write a new draft, send it out to the industry, get turned down, have trusted artistic friends read, give me notes. Then I would write another draft, and then I would try to rent out a theater, do a stage reading in front of an audience, and then get the feedback from the audience and go back to writing another draft. So the 15-year process for me was about 50-50. I would go back and forth, and I would just keep on fine-tuning until we got to Broadway. So I would say about 50-50.
So I know you mentioned before that you started writing the show when you were about 18, 19, and then about 15 years later, so about 30 years old, about then, when it landed on stage. So how much did the story change as you got older, or like as your life changed as a whole?
Oh, it changed a lot. I would say from the earlier versions and drafts that I wrote, maybe 20% made it to Broadway. It changed a lot because I grew. So the more I grew, the older I got, different situations in life, different relationships, different encounters with people, all influenced the characters of my play. When I first started writing the play, all of the characters were the same age. They was all around like 20 years old, because that's where I was in life. So that's what I knew. And that's the experience that I wrote. But as I started to age and realize what I was trying to do with the piece and show that Black men weren't monolithic, I knew that I needed to stretch out the ages. And that's when characters started to develop into, really becoming who, you saw on stage. So really from the age of 19 till now, it changed a great deal.
15 years is a long time. What kept you going and motivated to get this on your feet? Because like you were saying, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of things that, could get you stuck in some place, what's it called? When your brain isn't working and you don't know if you really want to write. Like, what kept you, writer's block, what kept you going? Great question.
I probably quit like once a week in my mind. Nobody will see that, but it is challenging. For me, I'm a spiritual person, and that's how I lead my life. So I know storytelling is my purpose, and that's what I kind of lean on. There's been times when I felt like before Broadway, maybe this is the furthest I can go, doing it at this small theater, or doing this festival or this workshop might be the best, that it could be. And I would always, it was weird with timing. When I was at those low points, I would always get an encouraging message from somebody, from somewhere. I have a very supportive family. My family have always supported me in my artistic endeavors since I was a kid. So elements like that have kept me going. Just the people in general. I pride myself on being an artist of the people because I feel like I'm made by my communities. So I kind of lean into that too. And I also lean into the fact that, I feel that I'm fortunate and privileged to be able to create. And I don't take for granted having the opportunity for people to hear my stories. And I feel like I speak for people that are not able to, especially a lot of the communities I live. People weren't fortunate enough to make it to this point, whether that's in life, whether that's educationally, because of economics and finances and things of that nature. So I feel like I would be doing a disservice to my people and my community if I didn't use the resources that I've been able to gain in telling our stories as a whole and telling the stories of our people. So I feel like that's more important than personal feelings and obstacles I may, face, because we all face that. And for me, I always go back to, I write plays, I act in plays. It's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? I know what it feels like to be hungry, to not have your lights on. That's hard, right? That's challenging. For me, I'm just writing plays, and I do it for more than myself. So I kind of lean into that perspective to kind of keep me going. And now that I have a family that's actually depending on me, that drives me more than anything.
Are you ever really nervous when your show is being put in a different city or somewhere else and you're not there to see it?
All the time. All the time. I'm nervous when I'm there, when I'm not there. Yes, it's very nerve-wracking for people to essentially be saying your words. Because sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. But that is the name of the game, right? Many people, you create the work for people to do, right? So it's definitely a nerve-wracking thing. For Broadway, even when I wouldn't go to shows, because I went every day for about a month, then I kind of slowed down, but I would always get reports from the stage managers, and I would always text my actors to see how they did and get feedback. But it's very nerve-wracking being in the audience, because I still think like a performer, so I want to be out there as well. And not being able to be out there with everybody is very nerve-wracking at times. But it's beautiful, it's fun, but definitely pull my hair out some days. But it's all beautiful though. But yes, I absolutely get nervous for sure.
So there was a woman originally in the show. What was the deciding factor to remove her from that?
Research. Love it. There were several women that used to be in the piece. The piece actually started off with speaking roles for women. Black women have always supported and uplifted me. I was raised by many black women. Like I said, I was raised by a village. So my mom has 3 sisters. I have other aunts on my father's side, my grandmothers when they was alive. So I was raised and cultivated and curated my whole life by black women. So for me, it was always important to have them there. Even when a decision was made to not have them in there, I still wanted them in there spiritually. So as you see the piece, you see the different types of relationships these men have, whether it's romantic, whether it's platonic, passerby, things of that nature. I wanted to show that, I wanted the presence of women to be very present. When the decision was made, it came down to a lot of different things artistically, but really the ultimate decision came down to I had this great opportunity to be able to create this space, this positive space for black men to be able to express themselves, which we don't often have, in authentic and positive ways. Usually when you have 7 black men, it's a narrative centered around sports, mass incarceration, street narratives, drugs, things of that nature. So I felt this was a great opportunity to really provide a safe space for black men to truly be who they are in totality, and really show the human condition of us, and that we do have it just like everybody else. So that was the ultimate decision take out the women in a way, as far as like the speaking roles, and at time they help with the movement and the choreography of the piece. And it's been a few incarnations over the 15 years. I've tried a little bit of everything, right? So, but that was the ultimate decision, to just really just give this space to Black men to be able to be themselves on the grandest stage.
Nice.
What experiences specifically did you take from personal life, hearing from, like you said, moms, aunties, wives, like wife. What did you? Wife.
Only
what did
one.
you? What did you?
It's okay.
What did you? Is there anything that you specifically took from your personal life and put into the play, as well as characters? Was there any character that you specifically took from, as like relationship, that you took from and put into the play?
Absolutely. All the characters have a little bit of DNA, a little bit of my DNA in them. And a lot of the characters are pulled from, real situations, real people. Wisdom is loosely based on my uncle. Passion is loosely based on myself. I was a school teacher. I was an educator for 11 years. So that's why that element of that character was there. Talking about his 126 kids or whatever the case may be. But yes, it's very personal. The character of depression was developed once I graduated from college at 22, sleeping on my mom's couch with a degree because it was the recession, so no jobs were available. So I was working at a grocery store, so I wrote that. So that's directly pulled from my life. So there are many, many different aspects of the play that I can point at that I pulled from my life, from friends, and in different types of situations that I've heard or seen or experienced myself. So the piece in a lot of ways is very personal and very metaphorical at times. I can't, there's probably not a line in a play that doesn't mean something or that I didn't take from somewhere, throughout the course of my life for this particular piece. So it's very personal, and absolutely a lot of it comes from my personal life. Yeah.
When casting for this play, what was going on in your mind? Like, what was some qualities that you were looking for in these characters?
That's a great question too. So we casted the whole play during the pandemic, which was new, right? So all the meetings that I had with the guys that you saw on stage, we had over Zoom. Of course, a lot of them we see on TV and film, so I knew a lot of these guys' work, and just like everybody else, I was fans of them as well, but it was a little unconventional. We had to, myself and my director, Steve Broadnex III, we had to meet them over Zoom, and really for me, I always want my rehearsal space to be a safe place, for everybody to be welcome, regardless of the fact, and not just the actors, but my stage managers, producers. I want it to be a safe space and a welcoming space for everybody that partakes in it, as best as possible. So we knew that we was going to get talented people, right? It's Broadway. We was going to be able to get people with great resumes and been on TV and film and been on stage. But what was most important for me and my director was to have good-spirited people. I want to work with people that have good spirits, good hearts, because that makes the process better. And this particular story is so personal, like we've been talking about. A brotherhood has to be formed to be able to bring this story to life. So we knew we didn't want people that had egos. We didn't want people in the room that people didn't want to be around. We wanted to have fun. We wanted to be light and just have a good time. So we looked for people that had that type of energy. And as you know, my play is an ensemble. There's not a starring role. One person doesn't do more than the other. And sometimes that's hard for Hollywood stars. If it's not a star role, it's like, I'll pass. So, but all of these 7 guys, individually being stars in their own right, signed up to check and leave their egos at the door and to come in and be a part of this brotherhood so we can deliver the best story we had. So those are the type of people we was looking for when we casted, these roles.
And when you saw the actors for the first time in person, how did you feel when they were saying or speaking your words?
Usually at the beginning, it's very tough for me because they're still learning. There's a certain cadence and rhythm that I write with. So it's likened kind of to Shakespeare in a way, in iambic pentameter. So sometimes it's not always easy to get. It's fun, but it's definitely a process for me at the beginning while everybody's still trying to find the wording and find the rhythm and the pacing and the comedic moments and things like that with all the issues that we talk about. So at the beginning, it definitely is a little tough, but it's always great to just be in a space and looking around the room and be able to see people that look like me. I've done a lot of things in the industry, and I'm not always able to be in rooms and it be filled up with people that look like me. So that's always a beautiful thing in my rehearsal room, especially for Thoughts of a Colored Man, with the characters in the play, to be able to just be in a room where everybody can be themselves. They can be their authentic selves. We don't have to wear any mask. We don't have to fit in. We can just come and be ourselves. So that's always a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you've done writing for a long time. Mm-hmm. Do you think writing poetry, do you think that made your writing a specific way, rather than if you were to gone, do you think you would have still gotten your story out if it weren't for specifically poetry? Do you think you could have gotten the story out? I don't know if I'm saying this right.
I've always believed in myself above anything, so I think I would have found my way, somehow, whatever path that would have been. But I think what makes me unique is my poetic background, and I think that sets me apart from a lot of writers in this space, and that's what I lean into. Very early on when I was learning, I was trying to imitate the greats like everybody else. I love Katori Hall, Lynn Nottage, August Wilson. These are people that I tried to emulate early on while I was finding my voice. But for me, my strength, I know, is poetry. So poetic language will always find its way into anything that I write. So that's kind of like my superpower. So I lean into that. And I think now being at this point, that's something that's recognizable in my style and my voice. So definitely now looking back, I think my background in slam poetry has helped me get here because it's my authentic voice. Because most assume, but I never went to school to study writing. I went to school to study acting. So for me, writing in the way that I do kind of came naturally through my performing and through the vehicle of poetry. So I do believe that, it helped me get here for sure.
Right, and also, do you ever go back to the writing that you did before? Do you ever read it over, and what's your reaction when reading it over from the past stuff?
Oh God, I think most of it's horrible. I cringe. No, but I was told by a good friend of mine one time to never throw anything away. Like in the movies when they crumble up the paper and throw it in the trash, my good friend told me never to throw anything away because you never know when something comes back full circle, and that's absolutely true. So there's been plenty of times I've read my old work and said, oh, this is not that bad. Maybe I can rework this a little bit, or maybe this is exactly what a character needs. This one sentence. So there have been times I've read my old work and used some of it, and really it's just a time capsule for me. Reading poetry from when I was 16, I see exactly where I was mentally. So for me, it's enjoyable to read back at my work because it kind of it's a memory lane thing for me. So it's great, but a lot of it is I've come a long way for sure.
Are there any rules that you really stick to as a writer?
Rules in what way?
Rules that if you do something wrong that you can't go back again.
Oh, got you. Yes. So I do have rules. So for me, I think early on, young writers, they think that the first thing they write is going to be the final and is going to be the greatest thing ever. So for me, I've discovered that the first thing I write is probably not going to be the best, but the rule I follow is I try to get my ideas out of my mind as quick as possible on the page, because the editing for me is when the magic happens. So in your mind, it can be great, but then when it gets on the page and you read it, it's it's not as good. Or especially when you start to hear other people read it, then you really realize how good it is, right? If it can, sound, good out of somebody else's, performance. So for me, I try to get my writing and my ideas onto the page so I can get to the editing process as quick as possible. So that's probably one of my main rules that I follow. I try not to let things, and granted, some ideas float around in my head for years, but as far as when I'm really trying to execute a story, I try to get it out of my head as quick as possible and get to that editing process. Because I know for me, it's going to be those multiple drafts. It's going to be that 15th draft that when I really start to see a story come to life versus the first thing that I write.
And why do you think you gravitate towards slam poetry more than other styles of writing?
I'm a huge fan of hip hop. I'm a huge fan of battle rap. It's a part of my DNA, and my parents and a lot of my uncles being at the age where they saw hip hop be created here in New York and live and exist around the pioneers of hip hop, because the beauty of hip hop is it's still young enough for a lot of the pioneers to still be alive and well and vibrant and all of those things. So when I discovered slam poetry, it was very reminiscent of the culture of hip hop. It was birthed from it, right? Mm-hmm. And that battle, kind of format and that aggression that New Yorkers have with hip hop. So slam poetry was that for me. So I gravitated towards it, and it was actually my first introduction to me personally performing. So since that was my introduction, it's kind of like just like one of those first love type things.
Now to go kind of the opposite way of slam poetry, was there any other passion that you had that was not slam poetry, had nothing to do with writing? Was there anything else that caught your eye before it that you thought, this is what I'm gonna do, this is my future?
Absolutely. My first love in life is drawing and painting. I've been doing that before I could remember. I think that's my God-given talent. And my aspiration and my goal in life was to work for Pixar. The first Toy Story came out when I was a kid, so it changed my life. It was a new technology. It was a new form of like cinema, so to speak, because a lot of that technology was like really just getting on its feet in a way, and especially with Toy Story. So I just remember being blown away. So I found out what that was and what that was called, and ever since I was young, I wanted to be a computer animator. I wanted to work for Pixar and make animation films. So that was definitely my passion, and still is, way before I started discovering performance poetry and things of that nature.
Can you take us through your discovery of slam poetry and how do you feel when you first discovered it, and how do you feel now about it?
So I started writing poetry at 13. After getting an assignment in 8th grade to write a poem, and the first time ever feeling like in an English class that I can do something better than my peers, because I didn't have any confidence in English ever. Never got an A on a paper, literally to this day. It was always a struggle for me. So when I discovered creative writing, I was like, oh, this is something that I can do. And at 15 is when I first stood on a stage, because at the time, my sister's boyfriend was scared to go to a cafe by himself and perform. He used to see me writing around the house, so he kind of took me to perform with him this particular night. And I messed up. I forgot my poem on stage, did horrible. I was very intimidated. Because I was performing with a lot of adults at the time. They was like in their 20s, 30s, and 40s at the time. I was 15, extremely nervous, never performed in front of a live audience before, and it freaked me out. So I went back and, of course, redeemed myself, and that's what started kind of what I do now, right? So the way I feel about it now, I still feel the same as I did there. I love the rawness of it. I love all of the performance poets that have come after me, the ones I see on YouTube, because YouTube didn't exist when I started doing slam poetry. So all the young artists I see on YouTube and competitions and on stage and things of that nature, I still love the culture. Of course, it's changed with anything. Things always change in art forms, and the world we live in society is forever changing, but I still feel the same. And like I said a little earlier, slam and poetry and spoken word finds its way in everything that I write. And it's not necessarily mean I have a poem in everything that I write, but as far as just the language and the energy of slam finds itself in most of the things that I work on. So I still feel the same. Slam poetry is a large reason why I'm here, and it helped me develop my voice into who I am as an artist.
And so for your plays and your poetry, what's your editing process or writing techniques that you use?
It differs from story to story. For me, I like to front load my work, meaning before I even get to the dialogue, because that's the fun part for me, is actually seeing the characters start to speak to each other. I do a lot of structuring at the beginning. A lot of outlines, story outlines, really try to flesh out my characters as much as possible, create the world and the environment that these characters are going to live in. Any research I need to do, if it's like a historical piece, or if I'm writing a certain type of character that may not be likened to myself, do a lot of reading and things of that nature. So most of the hours in the work goes into that. And then by the time I get to writing a first draft, I do that fairly quick. And then depending on what the story is, depends on how long the editing process is. Some are longer and shorter than others. But really, for me, I do a lot of pre-work before I get to the actual dialogue of telling stories.
In about 3 minutes, we'll be having a Q&A. So if you guys have some questions, but just a personal question.
Yeah.
How many hours a week, or if you can give it, like, how many hours do you think you write? Just a week.
That I write?
In a week.
That differs. Definitely
I can
differs.
imagine.
On average, like leisurely or like for work?
Leisurely. Or
Both, kind of like just
both.
writing in general?
Just writing.
On average, I would say maybe a good 15 hours, 14, 15 hours. I would say on average, I'm writing about at least 2 hours a day. Some days no writing happens. And some days I catch a groove and I'm writing for 4 or 5 hours. I have the luxury. My child is 14, so she's pretty self-sufficient at this point. So I'm able to get more done. So it really depends on the week and what I have going on, because now my life is filled with pitch meetings and meetings and things of that nature, all the business stuff that I don't care for. But I would say about on a great week, hopefully about at least 15 hours, so about two hours a day.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How do you work through experiencing writer's block?
Great question. For me, the way I've solved my writer's block, I work on a lot of things at once. So if I'm hitting a wall and I feel like I'm forcing things or dialogue, or I'm just forcing whatever I'm working on, I'll move to the next thing. And I've realized that that's okay. A lot of times people try to force a certain story or a character or dialogue, but for me, I could be working on 3 plays, a TV show, and a movie. So if I hit a wall on one, I'll literally put it down and I'll go work on the other thing. So for me, my ideas stay fresh. And then if I feel inspired again to pick up that one thing that I was struggling with, a week might have passed, and I come back to it with fresh eyes, and I start again. And that's kind of like my process between all the things that I work on. Clearly that can change, because sometimes the studio might give me a deadline, and therefore gotta push that, which isn't always fun, right? It's not the most creative space to be in when you have deadlines sometimes. But for me, if I'm going on my own timeline, I like to keep my mind fresh and kind of keep that creative spark going. So I kind of bounce back and forth between projects. So I don't feel like I'm getting stale with one.
You seem to have a few new pieces that are coming to light. So how fast did you shift from Thoughts of a Colored Man to these new pieces?
So, like I just said, I work on a lot of different things at once. So there was already several projects I was already working on before Broadway happened. Publicly, a lot of people got introduced to me in a major way through Broadway, but there was I had a lot of other irons in the fire, so to speak. So there was a lot of other things that I was developing, with whether it was studios or other creatives. So a lot of these other projects might seem like they just are coming to light, but really people are just paying attention more now. So a lot of these projects, I have my next play. It hasn't found a theater yet. It hasn't found a home. It's called the Migration LP. And it explores 5 decades in American history, starting at the beginning of the Negro migration. I've been working on that for 8 years now.
Oh.
So there's a lot of projects I've kind of been working on that people are more interested to hear and see now. So that's most of my projects. So a lot of projects that you're starting to hear about now, or any announcements that may come out about myself, just know when you see it or hear about it, it's already been in the works for some time. So that's how a lot of my projects are. I am working on new things as well, but things that are like soon to follow have already been in the process, so to speak, for several years as well.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
I think now is time for Q&A. So if we can get this mic started.
If you have any questions.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, please ask.
Come to the mic.
Like any questions. Wait, we'll have a mic.
Oh, let me turn my chair.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, absolutely.
If there was a magic wand
Mm-hmm.
and you could make any movie you ever wanted, one that would never be made by Pixar, what would that be like?
What would that movie be? That is a great question.
Anything at all.
That is great. So for me, that comes to mind first. I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so I would love to create, which I'm working on, my own epic, right? Like my own Star Wars, my own Star Trek, so to speak, whatever that may be. But for me, a passion project in whatever medium or form would probably have to do something with Stevie Wonder. He's my favorite musician of all time. So anything involving Stevie or his music or his life or his journey would be an honor for me to partake in. So that's what I would probably say. Great question.
Any other questions?
Because we're recording this for posterity. So. Thank you so much. One of our great. Everyone, give it up for O.
What's going on, brother?
What's up, Flip? For like all the young people in here on the camera, sitting down in the audience, the great host. You guys are amazing, by the way.
Absolutely. This is one of the best ever.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, you being back in their shoes, like what's one or two things or whatever you give them that you would have done differently that they can take now and just like have a head start?
That's a great question. What
Any advice?
Advice, I would honestly say to any young person, young artist in the room, and who will see, is really to believe in yourself. At times, people will not always believe or see your vision, but the most important thing, the person who needs to understand and see the vision is yourself. So above anything else, because you will have challenges, people will turn you down, especially in the entertainment industry, you will hear 1,000 more no's than you hear yes, but the reality is all you do need is that one yes, right? So above anything else is just believe in yourself beyond anything else. That's probably the greatest bit of advice I could give.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Any more questions? No? I have one question. Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You sure can?
If there was something that you could look back on your 17-year-old self and say, what would that be?
I would tell my 17-year-old self, don't stop. Don't stop. At that time, being passionate about what I wanted to do, but not knowing how I would get there, and clearly not knowing what life had in store for me, which was not a part of any plan or any vision I had for myself. But I would definitely just tell my 17-year-old self is to continue to be yourself, keep your integrity, do not compromise your morals, and don't stop.
I do have one question. If you could give us, I mean, obviously you have a love for all of the characters that you've made. Do you have a favorite?
That is hard. That is very hard because I feel like they're like my kids, right? Like I raised them, I grew up with them, all of those things. If I had to pick one, it would be passion, because I think that sums me up the best. I'm a very passionate person. I bring passion to anything that I do, and that is a character in the play that is the closest related to me in my real life. So I would say passion if I had to pick. So I loved what Luke James did. Huge fan of that brother. Been watching him for years, listening to his music for years. So to be able to have him portray passion, I definitely told him don't mess it up when we first cast him. But to have Luke bring passion to life on Broadway was amazing. So that's the character I would say.
Okay. I also have a question. How does your childhood affect like the way you write and the way that you say things?
Oh, tremendously, tremendously. New York is my origin. Is my first environment that I've lived in, where I was raised. So my community and just New York as a whole very much so influenced who I am, and that's how I walk through the world. I've lived in many different places at this point now. I lived in Southern Maryland, outside of DC, which was difficult. It was a culture shock, right? New York compared to that. I went to school in the mountains, so similar to like the environment of upstate New York, So I've lived in different environments. I've seen a lot of different types of people. I've traveled and all of that. But for me, I always carry New York with me. So my neighborhood, Palmer houses in Flushing, Queens, very much so is the reason, I am the person that I am.
Wow. That was a lot.
Yeah, a whole lot.
But thank you again so much for
Thank you.
coming out here and talking to us, please. Yes. Like seriously, I can't wait to see more of your stuff out there. I can't wait to read about you. I can't wait to tell young ones like, I talked to this man. I talked to this guy.
No, thank you. Y'all were brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Y'all were brilliant.
you.
Give it up for them. Absolutely. Brilliant. I love it.
Again,
Thank you.
my
I enjoy
name
myself.
is Ayana Milkius.
Hi, I'm Madison.
And I'm James.
And this is Keenan Scott II. And that was the HSA Podcast Spotlight.
Spotlight. Check
Thank
us
you so
out.
much for watching, and to the people that are going to be watching it later, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.